symposium today. There will be 6 speakers. They will speak about different things. And this symposium will be moderated by Dr. Ike Rivita. She got her PhD on pragmatic from Universitas Gajah Mada, Yogyakarta, and she currently is a lecturer, a senior lecturer in Andalas University. So I think I can pass the mic to Bu Ike to handle this symposium. Thank you. See you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Handoko. I think we can start now since it is 2 more minutes, a little bit late from the schedule. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable keynote speakers, Professor Eric Atwell from University of Leeds, United Kingdom, Dr. Patricia Fernandez Martin from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, Spain, Mr. Serkan Karakas from Istanbul Aydin University, Turkey, Dr. Shouki Khalifa from Shakra University, Saudi Arabia, Mr. Mohammed MLILESS PhD, the independent researcher from Morocco, Dr. Amir Kalan from McGill University, Canada, Mr. Dubi Nanda Dakhal, PhD from Tribhuvan University, Nepal, Dr. Devina Krishna from Patna Women's College, India, Dr. R. Kunjana Rahardi from Sanata Dharma University, Indonesia, Professor Octavianus from Universitas Andalas, Indonesia, and Ibu Dr. Rina Marnita from Universitas Andalas, Indonesia. Honorable Vice Dean for Academic Affairs of Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Andalas, Mr. Gusdi Sastra, PhD, the Chair of English Department, Hanafi M. Apling, PhD, the lecturers from English departments and from Faculty of Humanities around Universitas Andalas, all the attendees of international symposiums on linguistics, welcome to Universitas Andalas, even though it is virtually done. Praise be to Allah, the Almighty God, because we all can be here meeting in the very special occasion. In this moment, we proudly present the International Symposium on Linguistics with the main theme Research on Language and Disruptive Technology during COVID-19 pandemic. And this symposium is hosted by English Department, Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Andalas. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start the opening ceremony by welcoming the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs of Faculty of Humanities to give the opening speech. Please, Bapak Gusdi Sastra, PhD. Pak Gusdi Sastra, please. Is Pak Gusdi here, Pak Handoko?
Not yet, Bu. I cannot see Pak Gusdi. Let me see.
Yeah. Perhaps because of the connection or something else. Is it okay for us to skip or Pak Handoko?
Let me see first, Bu. Let me check Pak Gusdi. Okay, maybe we can skip, maybe later on, if we have time, after the first speaker, we will invite Pak Gusdi to give a welcoming speech for this event. Thank you, BK.
Okay, I'm so sorry for this inconvenience, ladies and gentlemen. We do hope that Pak Gusdi will join our program after sometimes. And I think we can directly go to our main agenda, presentation session, since our keynote speaker, Prof. Octavianus, as the first speaker here, is already joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, we skip the opening speech from the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs for a while, and we go to presentation session. And I would like to introduce myself first because I will be the moderator for first day symposium. I am Ike Revita, and I would like to welcome everyone in this very special event. Within these 2 days, ladies and gentlemen, we will provide you plenty opportunities to discuss, share knowledge, and learn from the experts from various countries about linguistics. We are going to be enriched with the knowledge about linguistics from various perspectives. I'm sure that we must be very lucky and we must be very curious to get more about the current research in linguistics. Even at the pandemic COVID situation, I think no reason to be obstructed, to be spiritless in conducting research in linguistics. Because with us now, we have Professor Octavianus, Professor Eric Ethel, Dr. Patricia, Mr. Sarchan, Dr. Shoki, and also Mr. Muhammad to inspire us to enrich our knowledge about linguistic research. And welcome to our symposium or keynote speakers. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we please our speaker to present the paper, let me inform some regulation in this session. Each speaker is provided time around 30 minutes, including Q&A. So the attendees could give question only via our chat room, and I will read your question in Q&A session. And our first speaker is Professor Octavianus. Professor Octavianus is from Universitas Andalas, Indonesia. He graduated his bachelor degree from Universitas Andalas, his master and doctoral degree from Universitas Udayana. Right now, Professor Octavianus is the head of Linguistic Department, Postgraduate Program, Universitas Andalas, and his research interest is semantics, pragmatics, and linguistic landscapes. And Prof. Octavianus is going to talk about linguistic landscape this afternoon. Okay, Prof. Octavianus, you have around 20 minutes presentation. Please, Prof. Octavianus.
Thank you very much, Wike. We hope that everything can run well, especially the signal, so we can follow this session until the end. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
I hope that all participants can hear me. Good afternoon, everybody. Salam sejahtera to all of us here. I would like to say welcome to this afternoon academic session. Nice to see you all. COVID-19 unite us in this Zoom. If not, then I'm sure that it is difficult to run this activity. Then I would like to express my gratitude and thanks to the committee for giving me the chance to speak. I suppose 30 minutes, but actually it is only 20 minutes, okay? That's okay. As the topic given by the committee to me, Linguistic Landscape and Cyberspace, and of course, in a very limited time, I will not talk or state general point, detailed point. I just want to talk about general point related to linguistic landscape and cyberspace. I may not come into specific topic in detail. We expect that this session can inspire students, can trigger lecture to do research on linguistic landscape and cyberspace. I will share screen, right?
Yeah, please, Pak, Prof. Octavianus.
Okay.
And also, please feel free to use that 30 minutes, Pak. If you need 30 minutes, it's okay, Pak.
Then if not?
But please not more than 30 minutes.
All right, I'll try, okay. Okay, all of you, can you see my PowerPoint?
Okay, Pak.
All right. On the first step, I would like to invite you to see this. So here we see the lake and then hilly places. We also see smoke, trees, and some other grass outside. we don't see any word and any sentence. So that it is called a natural landscape. Okay, and then we come to the second slide. We see this Viaza Cellular, and there is a word download aplikasi, cetak foto digital, alat tulis, Canon digital, photocopy, and so on and so on. Yeah, because we see here some word, phrase, then we call it linguistic landscape. In Bahasa Indonesia, we call it bentangan bahasa. All right, and then here again, this is a language at public places. And next, we see this picture. This is the Legian Street, and also there is Indonesian language and also Balinese language, and supported by information. The information is to invite visitor maybe to come to this place. Then if we go directly to this street in Legian, we may not find entering this street, visitor will find a modern district of Bali, and so on and so on. This is a supplemented information. Maybe. Okay, next, so from natural landscape, metaphorically, it is transferred into linguistic landscape, traditionally language at public places. Then again, it is transferred into cyberspace. So here again, if we look at this, they look the same. This is language at public places, and this one is language at cyberspace. All right, next, we see this. What is actually linguistic landscape? Linguistic landscape can be defined as a language of public road signs, and of course in many variations, advertisement billboard, street names, place names, commercial shop signs, and public sign on government building combined to form linguistic landscape of a given territory. This is quoted from Landry, Journal of Language and Social Psychology. And then another definition, language in the environment, word, images displayed and exposed in public places, that is the center of attention. So here maybe the design of the letter, the color, and the light are constructed to create the center of attention in the use of language in the form of linguistic landscape. And then we talk about implication to linguistic research. Is linguistic landscape approach a theory or a method? Then when students write thesis or do research in linguistic landscape, lecturer asks the question, what is the theory you use? What is the approach you use? Some say linguistic landscape is a branch of linguistics. Some say a method. But for me, myself, linguistic landscape can best be regarded as an approach to investigate, to study a displayed language in particular area. This is a traditional one. So we can look at the frame here. So linguistic landscape can be advertisement, can be name of the street, and then here the theory that are possible to be used are linguistic, phonology, morphology, syntax, and so on, branches of linguistics. It depends on the focus of our research. And then if you want to go deeper, we need to add other disciplines such as sociology, social approach, anthropology, cultural approach, and political approach. As stated by Grotter, that multidisciplinary studies from linguistic, sociological, and sociolinguistic perspective are also relevant for a better understanding of linguistic landscape. And I want to show you some model of linguistic landscape research done by Koluzi from University Malaya. This is a research in main street of Brunei Darussalam. The finding is a language variation. So there are 3 dominant languages there, English, Malay, and Mandarin. People in Brunei tend to use English, appreciate Malay, but sometimes they feel shy to use Malay. That's the result of the research. And then research conducted by Amr 2014 on the names of the shop in Aqaba found that the name of shop are dominated by Arabic and English language. English is regarded as prestigious language. That's because English is used for international communication in that business affairs. And then the next research done by Dobur on the use of sign and identity of Egyptian in demonstration at Tahrir Square. It was found that sarcastic expressions are dominantly used. This is because of demonstration, maybe. And then within 1 year, I did research on linguistic landscape of Rumah Makan Minang, published by Atlantis Press and Journal of Mosaic Humaniora. It was found that the sign system used at Rumah Makan Minang are combination between linguistic and non-linguistic sign with various design. Cultural identity is always displayed at Rumah Makan Minang. Even Rumah Makan is designed, it looks like the tip of the roof of Rumah Adat. And then the latest research on the use of written English at public places, 2018 and 19, indicated that English is used as a label, names, slogan, reminders, instruction, etc. In some public places, such as tourism destination and center of the city, the use of written English is dominant. The interesting thing is that people in Indonesia do not use English, but they tend to use written English at public places. So there is a gap here. So it seems to me that referring to linguistic landscape approach, English is used passively, not actively in Indonesia in some public places. And then migration of linguistic landscape into cyberspace. What we have discussed, as I stated just now, is the use of language in public places. So when we do research, we need to go to the field, we take a photo, we do interview to get the data. But because of industrial revolution of 4.0, and then comes Internet of the Things, migration of linguistic landscape into cyberspace is a must and is needed because people do not like to go everywhere. They just want to sit in the room and see the internet and access the use of language, including linguistic landscape. So here again, Industrial Revolution of 4.0 oriented to digital technology with a concept of IoT, Internet of the Things, and cyberspace affect the life of human beings, including their language. So here, cyberspace full of languages of various forms, function, meaning, value, and ideology. Okay, this condition can create an opportunity to us to do research on various disciplines in linguistic landscape. And then cyberspace contain big data for linguistic research. Why big data? I just see limited information. If we see in social media, Facebook in the world is used by 2.7 billion per month, or access 2 billion per month. And then WA is accessed or used by 2 billion people. User of social media in Indonesia, 160 million. And then user of Facebook, 140, Instagram, 56 million, Gmail, 1.5 million. So here, in all these social media, language are used widely in a various variation and construction. This is again very possible for us to collect the data in a very easy way. We don't need to go to the field, just sit in the room, then access the data. And then again, you see that linguistic landscape in cyberspace, which is constructed through computer-mediated communication, can be in two ways, synchronous and asynchronous communication, depending on the method and the media we use. So students and lecturers can collect the data through chat, WA, Instagram, email, Twitter, and SMS, whether it is in the form of synchronous or asynchronous communication. Here is the example. If we see this, this is one of the use of language in cyberspace. B4, B4N, before now, BBL, be back later, BD, big deal, BF, boyfriend. What is special here is that it seems to me that in cyberspace, the construction of language is very complete. Some of them are not found out of cyberspace. So maybe before can be found in SMS. But for example, yeah, BT, but we don't find that. We don't find that. So here it seems that the form and variation of language in internet or cyberspace are very productivity of language because of the productivity of human being. Then cyberspace. Again, collection of proverbs, songs, short story, humors, anecdote, puzzle, advertisement, etc. And then, yeah, it is not so difficult to collect this data. We just can access the internet and we do research on some topic of them based on one of the approach that we like. And then we would like to see several differences between, yeah, I can say natural language, natural setting, or public places, as I discussed at the beginning of this presentation. The characteristic of language at public places or natural setting just now, and to root. Polite to, but in cyberspace, we can see the difference, formal and informal, too many variations.
Prof. Octavianus, it seems like the connection is unstable. Hello, Prof. Octavianus. Oh, yeah, the connection. Yeah, that's, I do not put it as the problem, Prof. Atwell, yeah, yeah, because in such situation, sometimes something bad happen and it is beyond our power, like the connection or the situation, and we do hope that Prof. Octavianus can rejoin and yeah, Pak Han. Oh yeah, Prof. Octavianus.
Yes, BK.
Yeah.
So
something wrong with the
suddenly,
connection, Prof. Octavianus. Yeah, it seems like the connection, Prof. Okay, yeah.
Can you hear me from the beginning? Can you hear me from the beginning, BK?
Yes. But a little bit. Okay. Prof, please share again the screen, Prof.
One slide, BK. Okay, audience, here again we come to this session. So sorry for that. Okay, can you see this PowerPoint?
Yes,
this
yes,
slide?
Prof. Octavianus, yes.
Okay, right. Okay, now we go. So we stop here just now. So natural language or natural setting or places, non-cyberspace, the model of language is formal, informal, variation, field library research, easy to identify its context, then mostly, then polite to rude. What about language in cyberspace? Formal, informal, and then variation. Descriptive study of language. This is a very good for a linguist to see, to identify, to investigate a system of language. Data is relatively easy to access, but difficult to identify its context. So language in times so that we have electronic information transaction law. Hello, Bike, can you hear me?
Yeah, Bapak, but sometimes it is not so clear, Pak.
Or sometimes it's not so clear.
Yeah.
And then we come to the end conclusion. Advances in digital technology create a new era in the use of language. Linguistic landscape, public places, non-cyber, is migrated to cyberspace. Big data then can be kept in cyberspace and can easily be accessed for linguistic research. I think that's all, Bike. Thank you very much for this short session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Prof. Octavianus. You use a 20-minute shot. Yeah, Prof. Octavianus, we still have 10 minutes left. And let me see in our chat room. Yeah, because the research from Professor Octavianus is a little bit similar with Prof. Eric, Prof. Atwell. And maybe we could listen to the what do you think, Prof. Atwell? Since in chat room you stated that in Leeds, UK, street signs are in many languages, mainly English, but other languages can be more exotic and prestigious.
Good morning. It's
good morning. Good morning, Prof. Atwell.
7:30 in the morning here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed.
Prof,
Good morning, Prof. Eric.
Professor Octavianus said that in Indonesia, English is more prestigious than street signs. And it just made me think, in Leeds, in England, most of the signs are English, so that's not very prestigious. What is more prestigious is we have some street signs in Chinese or French or Russian, and that makes them more exotic. So it's actually more prestigious to have a different language, not English. But that depends on what country you're in, I suppose.
Yeah. Maybe Prof. Octavianus, the situation in Leeds a little bit different from us in Indonesia. Maybe Prof. Octavianus can give a comment about that. Please, Prof.
Yeah, the situation is different from Eric, because in Indonesia, actually the government remind us to like this. There are three languages actually: local languages, English, and Indonesian as a national languages. Indonesian as a national languages. Outside at public places, people tend to use English, whether they understand or not. They as the name of street sign, label of food, and so on. That's why English is very prestigious here in Indonesia, because I think it is different from UK, because there all English are all used everywhere. That's it.
Okay, Prof. Octavianus. So perhaps I wonder whether in Leeds, Prof. Atwell, Indonesian language is also used as in the street signs, but maybe you do not find it yet. We do hope someday Indonesian language will be there, Prof. Atwell. Okay, yeah. we still have many questions from Octavianus, from Bapak Kunjana Rahardi. Would you please explain further how linguistics landscape tend to be regarded as an approach in terms of teaching methodology, because an approach is always related to assumption. So according to Mr. Kunjana, he tends to say that linguistics landscape refers to research data. So what do you think about that, Professor Octavianus?
Yeah, Pak Kunjana, when here, linguistic landscape in Bahasa Indonesia is translated into bentangan bahasa. This is only a kind of collection of language at public places, whether it is name of the street, name of the shop, and so on and so on, where we have a collection of data confirmed. And you know that in the data that I displayed just now, copy center, there is a code mixing. So it's linguistic can use to this. So linguistic landscape is only a kind of approach.
Yeah, connection again. Yeah.
Can I say something, Bu Ike?
Yeah, because Pak Octavianus is not in Padang, around that natural landscape, Prof. Rahardi. The wind flows very hard. It's bothering the connection of Prof. Octavianus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay, Prof. Octavianus. Hello, Prof. Octavianus. You are still mute, Prof. Prof. Octavianus, your mic is still mute.
Pak Rahardi, we can say like this: an approach is linguistic landscape in a given area. So the theory applied can be pragmatic if the focus of your research is on pragmatic. And then the theory can be sociolinguistic, and social code switching, and so on. The theory can be metaphor if the use of language in public places is a metaphorical expression. So it depends. So it seems to me that students, when you plan to do research, if your research is top down, the theory you use depend on the characteristic of the data. Thank you, PK.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Octavianus and Prof. Rahardi as well. Maybe the last question, because we are with us now, Pak WD1, the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, has joined our meeting. And let me read the last question from Bapak IND, Mr. IND. In what field of linguistics is the study of linguistic landscape? Prof. Octavianus, please. Hello, Prof. Octavianus. Yeah, maybe Pak IND, you can keep the question, and also others. Seemingly, there is the connection of Prof. Octavianus is unstable, and as we informed previously that the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs has already joined our room, and we would like to invite Pak Gusdi Sastra to give a speech. And time is yours, Pak Gusdi.
Hey, thank you very much, Bu Ike. Halo, Bu Ike.
Ya, Pak Gusdi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Good afternoon, our national and international speakers and distinguished guests. All praise is due to Allah, for He has given us His blessing of health and the opportunity to attend today's event. I want to welcome all of you to the Department of English Literature, Faculty of Humanities, Andalas University. as the organizer of the International Conference of Linguistics that is held today on Zoom. May salawat and salam always be given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. I want to extend an apology from the Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Andalas University, for not being able to be with us today because of another engagement they could not leave. For this matter, I would like to deliver a few words in the hope that our schedule would run smoothly today and tomorrow. I would like to welcome to the Honorable Head of English Literature Program, the community, the lecturers, and the attendees, and my sincere appreciation to our national and international speakers for making time to talk in this conference and for sharing your insightful knowledge, and I would like to especially welcome the number one, Prof. Octavianus from the Department of English Literature, Andalas University, Prof. Eric Atwell from University of Leeds, England, Dr. Patricia from University of Madrid, Spain, Dr. Shauki from University of Shakra, Saudi Arabia, Dr. Mohamed Miles, researcher from Morocco, Dr. Sarsan Karakas from University of Istanbul, Aydin, Turkey, Dr. Amir Kalan from University of McGill, Canada, Dr. Rina Marnita from Andalas University, Padang, Dr. Dupi Danda from University of Tribhuvan, Nepal, Dr. Devina Krishna from Human College, India, and Dr. Kunjana Rahardi from University of Sanata Dharma, Indonesia. Those are the names of our 11 highly competent speakers in their own field of study. Their share of insights into the research on linguistics would make this conference exceptional and too insightful to miss, despite what has been happening worldwide due to COVID-19. This conference is a positive effort to keep our contributions going to the academic, work, and culture. I invite all the lecturers, bachelor and master students, researchers, and language enthusiasts. Let's all be fully present and committed to listening to our speakers and not missing the opportunity to have meaningful conversation with each other. Dear fellow speakers and members, technological innovation in this industrial era has shifted our way of thinking and working. We have gradually seen it. Science field years ago, but not many of us truly had the complete picture of how it would impact our life. We had never witnessed in more ever since the COVID-19 hit and changed almost every aspect of our life in matter of only a few weeks. With the limited sources of knowledge and facility, everyone, including as language researchers in record to adapt to the new meaning of life. In the first few weeks since the pandemic hit, I believe many of us were clueless as nobody saw it coming. We became unproductive for a while because we did not know what to do. There were ongoing researchers that had to be delayed or even canceled. But once again, human brain is the proof that we could carry on despite the extreme uncertainties. Using the exciting technology we rise up even faster than before. We were unsure about the future of our research, but not we could collaborate with other research abroad, only by distance and time difference. In light of this reality, this international conference means a great deal as our attempt to keep up to speed with recent linguistics development from other countries. Furthermore, the latest novelties in language researchers have been associated with social and technological change due to the pandemic, either casual or textual. The novelties came up in the types of methods we use, the kind of instrument we choose, and other aspects of our research. I would like to congratulate and thanks the Dean, the English Department of Andalas University Chairman, and the organizing committees for the tremendous effort in organizing these conferences. I hope that the conference will accomplish all its aims. And once again, I am honored to virtually welcome to you to our university, and I wish that all of us who participate will be more enriched and end our encounter with Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This international conference is officially begins. Billahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Bapak Gusdi Sastra PhD, the Vice Dean for Academic Affairs of Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Andalas, and Prof. Octavianus. Actually, there are still many questions, but since the time provided for each
so sorry for
30
that.
minutes,
so
it's
sorry
okay,
for
Bapak.
that, audiences.
That's the dynamicity of having meeting virtually, Bapak. Something beyond our power.
That's what I'm afraid of at the beginning of this session.
Yeah, but everything is okay, Bapak. Thank you, Prof. Octavianus, and let's give very warm applause to Professor Octavianus from his informative talk. Thank you, Prof. Octavianus. Ladies and gentlemen, now we go on to our second speaker, Professor Eric Atwell from University of Leeds, United Kingdom. Good morning, Prof. Atwell. Still around 8 in the morning, yeah, Prof. And Prof. Eric Atwell is from University of Leeds, England. His PhD is about corpus linguistics and language learning. He achieved it in 2008. And right now, Prof. Atwell is a professor of artificial intelligence for language. And his research interest is about artificial intelligence, language, computing linguistics, machine learning, data mining, natural language processing, text analytics, English, Arabic, Quran, religious, health, medical text, autism, and corpus linguistics. And in this afternoon, in Indonesian time, and in this morning, in this time, Prof. Atwell is going to talk about the new Linguistics 101 for 2020. What fact, glow fee, fast text, but blue squad swag. And sorry if I mispronounce for this. And okay, Professor Atwell, you have 20 minutes, please.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you see the PowerPoint slides?
Yes, Prof. Atwell.
Okay, really? Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk. So I have a background in linguistics. Oops, a daisy. This seems to have. Right, start again. Sorry. So my background is in artificial intelligence and applied to language. And what I want to say is maybe a bit disruptive, but given that the topic of this symposium is disruptive technology, I'm going to suggest that students need to learn linguistics students need to learn not so much about traditional subjects in linguistics, but more about the new artificial intelligence methods that are being used. So my background is in using a corpus, a computer analysis of a text data set in corpus linguistics. So corpus linguistics is a study of language based on analysis of a corpus. And to do this, we use artificial intelligence methods, which basically means machine learning, extracting knowledge from the data, or in this case, from the corpus. And this allows us to do natural language processing or computational linguistics, which is all about machine learning from the corpus. So I did a quick search on Google for Linguistics 101. 101 is a standard term in American universities for the introduction course. So Linguistics 101 in Stanford and Harvard and places like that, you teach about phonology, or the sound system of language, morphology, the structure of words, how words are combined, or syntax, which is the combinations of words into sentences and grammar, and then semantics, the meanings of words and sentences. And maybe you might also cover the lexicon, words themselves. And in most universities, you probably have a course a bit like this. So that's what you teach in linguistics. But in 2020, most language is online. So we already saw that there's the web, Facebook and Twitter, and it's mostly text. That means that phonetics and phonology are not of any use anymore. For machine learning, in artificial intelligence, we don't really need theory of phonetics and phonology or morphology or syntax or semantics. For machine learning approaches of language, you basically have to define a task and a corpus, and the corpus can be just a bag of words. You don't need to learn about morphology or syntax or semantics. The task is how to solve a particular task from a set of examples. So in AI, a lot of research involves gathering together a corpus or a sample of examples. So for example, a standard data set is something called GLUE, the General Language Understanding Evaluation Task. And a particular problem is set, and it's a data set where lots of examples are given, and the examples are labeled by people. So GLUE contains a number of examples, including these. So SST, I won't even try to say what all your acronyms mean, but SST is, given a movie review, can you predict the sentiment? Can you say, is it positive or negative? And SST contains lots of movie reviews, and for each one, some linguists have added a tag plus positive or negative. COLA is another example. Given a sentence, is it acceptable? So linguists have gone through there's lots of examples of sentences in English, and a linguist has said, yes, it's acceptable, or no, it's not. Can you hear me? I hope you can. Okay.
Yes,
Another
yes.
example.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
STSB and MRPC are pairs of sentences, and a linguist has marked each pair as yes or no. Do they mean the same thing or similar things? QQP is pairs of questions. Quora is a website where you can ask questions, and from this they've extracted pairs of questions, and the task is, are the two questions similar? So a linguist has gone through and marked for every pair yes or no. QNNI is another pair of a question and a sentence, and in this case the linguist has gone through and said, does the sentence answer the question, or does it contain the answer to the question? And then MNLI and RTE are, again, pairs of sentences. Here the task is, does the second sentence, is it an entailment of the first, or is it a contradiction of the first, or is it neutral? So here you've got three classes. A bit more complicatedly, Squad is a Stanford question answer data set. And here we have a question and not just an answer, but a passage from Wikipedia. And the linguist has gone through and marked, does the passage from Wikipedia give the answer? And if so, which bit of the Wikipedia has the answer in it? So it's not just yes or no, but it marks a part of Wikipedia where the answer is. Or SWAG, this is situations with adversarial generations. Again, a lot of examples, and for each sentence, there are 4 possible answers, or it's not answers, it's continuations. Which one is the most plausible continuation from the sentence? So you have, rather than teaching about phonetics and linguistics in terms of standard theories of language, but each task has a text and a classifier, or many tasks involve 2 pieces of text and the class. So for example, a pair of sentences and are they similar? A sentence, and yes or no. And that's how you train the model, and that's the task you have to try to solve. So to solve all of these tasks, we need to be able to measure the similarity or distance between 2 sentences, or a sentence and a question, or 2 bits of text. So how do you measure similarity? Well, the solution from artificial intelligence is, if you want to measure the distance between 2 things, it's easiest if you have 2 numbers, like the distance between 3 and 9 is 6. The distance between 1 and 2 is 1. You can also do this with vectors of numbers, is a set of numbers. So 2, 2, 2 is quite near to 2, 3, 3. And the distance between them is like the distance between 2 and 2 is 1, the distance between 2 and 3 is 1, and the distance between 2 and 3 is 1. Sorry, the distance between 2 and 2 is 0. So 0 plus 1 plus 1 is a total distance of 2. Whereas 791 is further away. So in general, if you can convert a word into a vector of numbers, or a sentence into a vector of numbers, then you can measure the distance. So Word2Vec, Glove, and Fast Text, these are different software or tools or methods to convert a word into a vector of numbers. And rather than just having 3 numbers, the meaning of a word is quite complicated. So you typically have 300 numbers. So this deep learning or neural network can take a corpus, and for every word, so for example, in the previous sentence using deep learning neural network, the word neural has in its context words like learning and network. And what Word2Vec does is it takes a large corpus, looks up all the examples of neural, and looks at the words around it, like learning and network, and it comes up with a vector of 300 numbers. So the vector for neural is, for example, 0.13 and so on. And the meaning of a sentence is basically just a combination of all of these vectors. So using a deep learning neural network, you get the vector for using, the vector for vector for deep, vector for learning, and so on, and join them all together. And then that was about 2013, 2014 that these were developed. And then more recently, we have BERT, and then this year, BART. Google Research Labs developed these as a transformer. A transformer neural network takes a pair of texts and a class. So for example, BERT, you can give it a sentence and a sentence, and the output is yes or no. And then you can test BERT by giving it a new sentence and another sentence, and BERT will predict yes or no. And BART is essentially the same sort of thing, but even better. So the conclusion is, really, machine learning is about how to solve a task given a data set. So machine learning models learn vectors of numbers from words in the corpus. And the BERT transformer, if you give it a pair of sentences and a class, something you want to predict about it, which could be yes or no, then if you give it hundreds of thousands of examples of one sentence and another sentence and the class that pair belongs to, then it can learn how to do that. And then you can give it another sentence or another pair of sentences, and it will then predict the class. And those pairs of sentences can be an answer and a question, or two sentences which are similar or not similar. That means in 2020, linguistic students don't want to learn about phonology and morphology and syntax and semantics. What they should do is learn about glue and squad and squag as the type of tasks that linguists have to deal with, and then word2vec and glove and fast text are tools for converting a word into a vector of numbers, and then BERT and BART are tools for taking a pair of sentences and predicting what class they belong to. I did have a case study, but I'm not going to have time to go into the case study. I'll just very quickly talk about this. A nice example at Leeds is we've used word2vec and glove for automatically predicting multi-word expressions. So a collocation is words or phrases that go together a lot, and a multi-word expression is a phrase or idiom where the meaning of the phrase is different from the meaning of the individual words. And these are quite important because maybe half of all sentences contain at least one multi-word expression. And for learners of English, they're quite hard to learn. So the research challenge for English or for any language is, can you automatically extract these from a corpus? And you can look at, you can calculate for every word its probability, and for every pair of words the probability. The problem is, to do this for all words and all pairs of words, you have to have a very large corpus. So for example, for Arabic, we've collected from the web nearly 200 million words, and from that you can extract examples of interesting words and interesting pairs of words. I did a PhD student of mine, Ayman Al-Ghamdi, did this for Arabic. He went through and from this large corpus of Arabic, collected all the pairs of words where the pair of words had a frequency or a probability which was more than you might predict by looking at the probability of individual words. And then for each of these pairs, which were interesting, each of these collocations, you have to decide, does the meaning of the word pair differ from the meaning of the individual words? For the first task of collecting all the word pairs that are very frequent, you can do that by program straightforwardly. The second task is looking at the phrase, is the meaning different from the individual words? He had to do that by human judgment. He had to look at it and decide, is the meaning different? So for example, for green fingers, is the meaning of green fingers different from the meaning of green and the meaning of fingers? Tom Picard is a research student who's now just going to be a research fellow. What he did the same task, but using a program, using word2vec or using glove. So what you can do is work out the meaning of X, green, and the meaning of Y, fingers, and the meaning of green fingers, X and Y, using word2vec. And if basically, if the probability of the word pair is different, then you can calculate the probability of the word pair. And if the glove meaning or the word2vec vector of the word pair is different than the word pair, the vector of the individual words, then that predicts automatically that it's a multi-word expression. So if you use glove, then you can do this automatically. Okay, so my overall conclusion is that machine learning is about learning to solve a task from a corpus. Machine learning can convert a word into a vector of numbers, or BERT, the transformer, can convert a sentence and another sentence and a class using deep learning into a task that it can predict. So what linguistic students need to learn about isn't so much phonology or morphology or syntax and semantics. They need to learn about these tasks like glue and squad and swag, and the tools like Word2Vec and Glove and fast text for learning the meanings of words, and tools or transformers like Bert and Bart for learning the relationship between two sentences. And that gives you a much better way of dealing with text without having to understand syntax and semantics and morphology. Okay, and I think there I'll stop sharing my screen and open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Atwell. Very inspiring. I'm sure that some of us are not familiar yet with these terms, because seems like from your explanation that the students do not need to learn the micro-linguistic anymore. They do not need to learn phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics, but they must know some tools related to machine learning. And we have some questions here, Prof. Atwell. From FIFO 1820, I do not know whether it is he or she. She was thinking number into answering strategy in testing system. So it is related to testing or maybe assessment system. What do you think about that, Prof. Atwell? Yes, Prof. Atwell?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. I was thinking number into answering strategy in testing system.
Yeah.
What is the question?
I think it is closely related to the testing system, or maybe assessment, Prof. Atwell, assessment or testing system. Yeah.
So
can we involve such kind of tool when we are having testing system, Prof. Atwell?
Yeah. So if you have lots of questions and answers, then the transformer can learn to map from the question to the answer and say yes or no, is this the correct answer? So in principle, you could use this for marking student answers to questions, or so it could be used for testing. And typically it's used for mapping, for finding out if the answer is the correct answer, or if it's semantically related to the answer, as opposed to being the wrong answer.
Okay, so in phonology, morphology, syntax, we are mostly dealing with words or sound, Prof. And this is related to the next question from Ayumi. How about speech to text case? Text, is it part of artificial intelligence of language? And how does the phonological aspect of the speech affect the result? So does the phonological aspect of the speech affect the result? Two questions from Ayumi.
Yeah.
Yes, so please, Prof. Mm-hmm.
So the sort of BERT transformer essentially maps from one thing to another thing, and it could be a question to an answer, or one sentence to another similar sentence. But in principle, it could also be from a speech signal to a piece of text. So if you have the audio signal and the text transcription for 100,000 sentences, then it will learn how to map from an audio signal to the transcript. So in that case, it doesn't really use phonetics or phonology in the linguistic sense. It simply has the speech signal is some sort of digital signal, and the text is some other sort of digital signal. Mm-hmm. So a lot of speech to text systems do not use linguistic theory at all. It's just a signal processing task.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Prof. Atwell. We still have question from Despina. She's asking about the tree banks available in the literature with the basic of syntax or syntactic hierarchy. So how is it possible that the syntactic knowledge is not needed for NLP, especially if you want to have a corpus of syntactic trees or tree bank?
Yeah, so you might think, if you want to translate from, or if you want to map from a question to an answer, then what you should do is work out the syntactic structure of the question first, and then use that to generate a syntactic structure of the answer somehow. But actually, the syntax is implicit in the sentence. So if you have a sentence, what the transformer is doing is it's mapping from a sequence of words to another sequence of words, and inside the sequence, the syntax tree the grammar is implicit, so it doesn't need to do a parse tree as well. The great thing about transformer is it maps directly from one sentence to another sentence without explicitly having to work out the grammar first. So this is a problem for linguists, because I've spent a lot of time working on part of speech tagging and parsing, and this is interesting for linguists, but the AI system, the machine learning system, doesn't need it. It's unfortunate. It's like, if you want to carry on building parse trees because it's interesting as a hobby, that's fine, but Google doesn't need it.
Can I begin?
Yeah, Prof. Octavianus. So, Prof. Octavianus is given privilege to give direct question to Prof. Atwell. Yes, please, Prof. Octavianus.
This is an interesting topic, Prof. Atwell. We know that one of the goal of research on linguistics is to find system or rules or patterns of language. In one hand, corpus linguistic is only a collection of data or big data. And then machine can help linguists to process the data. I'm afraid that data processed by machine and data processed by linguists will have a different result. It is related to productivity of language. We need your comment.
Yeah, okay, so the neural network to translate or to map or transform from a question to an answer, or from one sentence to another sentence, the neural network does have internal structure, which is a model of the language, but it's quite different from the model that a linguist might write down on a piece of paper as a description of the grammar. It is there, it's just a completely different sort of model. So a big research task in artificial intelligence is, how do we understand the neural network model? What is the meaning inside this complicated neural network model? So linguists can maybe help to explain what the neural network means. Maybe that's still, linguistics is still relevant in that sense. There's a real problem that for linguists, in that Facebook and Google and Microsoft are developing language processing models, but they're completely bypassing linguistics. They're not using all your knowledge that you have. If they have lots and lots, hundreds and thousands of examples of question and answer or whatever, then the neural network can automatically work out linguistic structure somehow, and we don't understand what's happening. It's a big black box. But maybe linguistics can help in explaining the black box.
Okay, Prof. Octavianus and Prof. Atwell, since the time is already 30 minutes, but actually me, myself, Prof. Atwell also have question, but later on. I will, if it is permitted, I will ask you email via Mr. Handoko. It is related to context, how the machine processed the context. That's what I am curious to know about that, Mr. Prof. Atwell. Okay, thank you for very insightful and inspiring presentation, Prof. Atwell, and let's give very warm applause to our second keynote speaker, Prof. Atwell. Thank you, Prof. Atwell. And ladies and gentlemen, we go on to the third speaker. She's Dr. Patricia Fernandez Martin. Dr. Patricia is from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, Spain. Sorry for mispronunciation. And her qualification is she got her PhD from Universidad Complutense de Madrid, and right now she's lecturer and also academic secretary. Her research interest is about Spanish language, didactics of Spanish language. And Dr. Patricia is going to talk about verbal paraphrase in Spanish Golden Age. So a little bit narrower to micro-linguistics, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, Dr. Patricia, you have 20 minutes from now, please.
Okay, well, first, I'd like to thank you all because it's a very important opportunity for me to show my work for the rest of the world. Well, my speech is divided into 4 parts according to the normal and traditional, well, not so traditional, but with the current parts of a speech of a research work. I'm going to give you an introduction about what a verbal periphrase is first, because I think it's something that it's complex enough just to offer a little bit of a discussion later. Afterwards, I'll show you the methodology that I've carried out to deepen the different verbal periphrases that I'm going to show you. The results will offer you some kind of data regarding 3 variables that I've previously mentioned, and I'll close my speech with some discussion and conclusions, and it would be very satisfying for me if you just had any questions. So my aims for this speech is to deepen the history of Spanish grammar through a very specific structure such as verbal periphrases. I think that here I'm going to take into consideration the variable one, that's time. So I am positioning myself into the in a diachronic point of view, in a diachronic perspective. Secondly, I'm going to compare what kinds of verbal periphrases are in each discourse tradition, I mean in the genre. That's for me the second variable. And that's something that I've already done for a long time, but I've prepared something special, something specific for this symposium. So I think it's very interesting to share with you some new results from this new perspective for me. And my third aim has to check whether there are any differences between female and male writers regarding the usage of these structures in Spanish Golden Age. So the third variable I'm working on here is gender, the gender of the writers. And as a state of the art, you know, well, we have to read lots of things, that's normal, but I am basing my work on 3 special scholars. Those are, well, 3 or 4 actually, because as you will probably know, when we are researching in diachronics, we have to take into consideration previously the synchronic perspective. That's normal. The problem here is that we don't have the intuition to prove if something is really correct or not 2, 3, 4, 500 years ago. So I have chosen here 4 scholars concretely. All of them are from different schools, but they share something that's meaning. They focus on the meaning of the structures instead of in the form. And the diachronic perspective sheds also lots of light into the question, especially with the works by Feldman, Higuera, and Jelinski. Well, I have added myself because it's new, but obviously it's not my source. It's a result of my own research. So the question here is, what is a verbal periphrase? That's a structure that we can find in different Roman languages. That's a structure that is very controversial because in contrast to other morphosyntax structures, such as the articles or a noun or a noun or an adjective, there is no an agreement in what a verbal periphrase is. So we have, or we can start from defending the same idea as Olberts, who claims that a verbal periphrase is a productive and indissoluble combination of an auxiliarized lexical verb with a verbal predicate in a specific non-finite form in which the finite verb agrees with the first argument of the non-finite verb, meaning that there is a concordance between both of them. The function of this combination is the semantic modification of what is expressed by the non-finite predicate and its argument. The non-finite form can be an infinitive, a gerund, or a participle. And in some examples, in some cases, they can be joined by a preposition or a conjunction. So in my conception of this concept, the verbal periphrase is to be found between the grammar, the lexicon, and the pragmatics. I have written for you some examples about that. Verbal tense, it's well, the verb plus the past participle. That would be in the grammar extreme. The verbal locution, I mean idioms in general, which are formed by a verb and with another verb, but which have different meanings. For example, tener que ver, it doesn't have to do with the we have to see. That would be the literal translation, but it's the expression it doesn't have to do. So it's like there has been a lexicalization in this example from a diachronic point of view. And there are also cases which have suffered even a pragmatization. That could be the discourse marker a saber. That's to say, for example, but it comes from a verbal periphrase such as es a saber. That's it's to know, you know. So the interaction here between grammar, lexicon, and discourse is the key issue of my research actually. So, in order to apply this concept by Olberts to the diachronic perspective, and in order to get a concept that I can apply to a stage of languages, of the language in this case of Spanish, which are previous to mine, because I don't have that intuition to check if a sentence is correct or not, because I have to think about the way of talking 400 years ago is not the same as today's. I needed a kind of a concept. I needed some tests. I needed a proof, some kind of evidence just to apply to these sentences and to decide whether a structure is a verbal periphrase in the past. So I've used this Olberts definition partially, and I have added two features more. So I am talking now about 5 features that can be used to define the concept of verbal periphrase: morphological filter, agent's identity, substitution test, omission test, and productivity test. 3, 4, and 5 come completely from Olberts. The 2 first ones are from other authors, and I have just put them all together in order to get this kind of concept. So the morphological filter means that we have to be sure that we are finding a finite verb and a non-finite verb. Does it mean that that's the only way we can define a verbal periphrase? No. That only means that it's my concept of verbal periphrase, because, as I have said, it's not that easy to find an agreement with the topic. So there might be other structures that with this with a different morphological structure, morphosyntactic structure, may be considered a verbal periphrase by other scholars. That's what I mean. The agent's identity means that the subject of the finite verb has to be exactly the same to the subject of the non-finite verb. Otherwise, we are confusing verbal periphrases with causative structures. The third test, what we are doing here is just to replace. We replace the non-finite form with a noun, an adjective, or an adverb, depending on whether it is an infinitive, a gerund, or a past participle. If we apply the omission test, what we are doing is just to erase the second part. So we are showing that there is a core, that the phrase needs both words, that it doesn't work without the lexical verb. And finally, the fifth test shows the difference between the verbal periphrases and the phraseological units, because we tend to think that everything can be, well, in this case, that everything can be a little bit similar, but they are not. I can't say something like Juan rompió a coser, something like that, because not all of the verbs go exactly in the same with all the main verbs, but they can go together with the verbal periphrases. That's the point. Well, as a second feature, I would like to add that once we have agreed what a verbal periphrase is, we have then to pay attention to how we can manage them, how we can classify them. Here, the key is to understand that each group of verbal periphrases behave in a different way from a historical point of view, and then they need a different classification. That's the reason why I have shown, or I want to show you, the different groups and the different subgroups, sub-classification. First, the modal periphrases, which offer deontic and epistemic meaning, among others, have to be classified in a precisely way, not only taking into account the form of the verbal periphrase, but taking into account the meaning of the verbal periphrase, as I'm going to show you later. The second group deals with the periphrases with motion verbs. That means here we have checked a metaphoricalization from space to time, and that's the reason we are going to find them in different stages of this process. So they have to be treated in a different way, the modal periphrases. Two groups more. We have the perfective periphrases, which give us the passive and the resultative. We have here the controversial ser and estar plus past participle, and tener and llevar. Here we have some problems. For instance, not all the scholars admit the ser and estar and as verbal periphrases, because they just say that they are passive. They are expressing the passive voice. But I'm completely convinced that they do express passive voice, of course, but they are, from a diachronic point of view, they are also verbal periphrases. So I think it's very important to take them into consideration. And the fourth group I would like to focus on just a little bit is the gradation group, because there are very many verbal periphrases, and they offer a grammatical aspect. So I'm going to only to focus here in the gradation, and that's something I'm going to explain a little bit later. So the corpus I've chosen for this research is well, I have tried to choose it with following 4 sociocultural criteria. First, I have tried to keep a gender balance, just to follow my third variable, my third aim. 2 of them are written by women, 2 of them are written by men. The second one has to do with the discourse richness. I have a set of letters, an autobiography, a chronicle of the Indies, and a play. The third one actually implies a difference, or at least a continuum, between the language of immediacy and the language of distance, in terms of being, in terms of checking up to what point each one of them is closer to the spoken or written language. Well, Koch and Osterreicher are obviously a little bit more complex with that. They wouldn't agree, because what they want precisely is just to break these differences between spoken and written language, and they create this continuum for that. So I think that letters and play would tend to be more accurately in the language of immediacy, whereas the autobiography and the chronicle of the Indies would represent the language of distance, give or take. And my fourth variable, as you will probably remember, is time. So I've chosen my texts from 16th to 17th century in a very accurate scope of time. So as you can just have a general idea, I have prepared for you this table, when you can see the Vida written by Sanfiris Auchisos, the Pasos written by Lope de Rueda, the Cartas by Sister María de Jesús de Ágreda, and the Comentarios Reales by Garcilaso de la Vega. As you can see, the writer's gender is different: female, male, female, male. The type of discourse is an autobiography, a play, letters, and a chronicle of the Indies. The degree of immediacy is a little bit artificial, I know, but I haven't come up with another way of measuring it. And the time, as I have said, is from 16th to 17th century. I know my limitations. I'm perfectly aware of this. I am not using big data, as my previous colleague would probably defend. And well, it's necessary, because I have chosen that because I think they are not necessary for me to get these conclusions. I mean, if I try to make a relationship between my aims and my corpus, I think it's more accurate than only to have a look at the electronic corpus. My calculations have been made by hand, I mean, through Excel. So I assume that there will be some human mistakes. So I think that I cannot do anything about that in reality. But in my defense, I'll say that we always have problems with search engines of the electronic corpora. That the electronic corpora do not have everything, because that depends on the transcriptor's interests, meaning that we, as researchers, we can find that the transcriptor's interests are different to ours. In that case, we are not going to find exactly what we want to, because perhaps that hasn't been labeled properly for the researcher. So that's something I think I have to bear in mind. And finally, just to, well, I think that no corpus will ever be a fully perfect match to the research questions and target population. So if we take this as a basis, well, I think everything almost can be defended. Well, the first group, as I have said, deals with the periphrases with motion verbs in an autobiography. To understand this proposal, this suggestion of classification, we have to keep a wide perspective of time and change, because the types co-live for centuries. That's the richness of the grammaticalization theory. The change is very slow here, but at the same time, it's very complicated, because there are loads of bifurcations, dead ends, one-way paths, unexpected crossroads, and The criteria, I'm following here Jelinski, the criteria just to keep this classification only for these kinds of verbal periphrases are clitics, the role played by clitics, the subject's identity, the aspect of the non-finite verb, and different arguments. I'm not going to focus on it because I think it's enough just to show you my scheme I have already published. As you can see, there are 4 groups, and on the top, the first one, those are referring to the verbal periphrases importance. So that's something that they are going to be, or they might be in the future, but they are not. The second and the third, it's like, well, depending on the tests, they are closer to the origins or closer to the last stage. And finally, the fourth one is something that is completely grammaticalized. I have written for you some examples in Spanish. I'm trying to translate them. Concertábamos irnos a tierra de moros pidiendo por amor de Dios. Here we have only just motion. It's pure motion. There is no grammaticalization at all. They are talking about go to the land, okay? The second one, it said, qué disparate ir de la luz para andar siempre tropezando. Here we have a meaning of repetition. That's not the same to the meaning of, it's a way of expressing the repetition and the importance of the subject is human, so we are not in the third phase as here, where the subject is not human, because entendimiento is the reason. So once we understand that it's like a step forward in the process, then we can understand the wide view of the motion verbs and how they work. The fourth example is very interesting, but it doesn't belong to the 16th century. It belongs to the 19th, and that would be an example of the complete grammaticalized. Well, it's an idiom. Vamos a ver means let's see. It doesn't have anything to do with the verb go. We can see in vamos in the first person plural. The second group, well, just you have to figure now that this triangle represents an action, so we can focus on the beginning of the action, on the end of the action, or on the interruption of the action. I have chosen just one example here to show you the geniality of the playwright who wrote ya compiezo de acabar. As you can see here, the empezar, comenzar a, he is mixing both verbs, probably with intention, because he wants to characterize the character Alameda as a little bit rustic and archaic. The following group is made by is conformed by the periphrases with modality, with a modal meaning, and I have here created a kind of classification taking the moral philosophy to understand the difference between counter-obligation, non-obligation, and obligation. As you will see later, I have to make some changes here, but in general, that's the overview. So I just make a difference between the communicative function and the philosophical basis, just to try to understand each of the examples. For instance, to express external natural obligation, this nun says, a vuestra merced debe fiar. Por tanto, cuando a nuestra debe fiar de poder divino. Vuestra merced is you have to trust in God, so to speak. So it's necessary because it doesn't depend on you. It's an external and natural obligation. In this case, it comes from God. So you have to do that. You are not free to do whatever you want to. Well, I remind you that this nun is writing to the king of Spain, to Felipe IV. So she is trying to give him some pieces of advice about how to behave. Of course, he doesn't listen to her, but well, that's normal. And The second example I would like to show you is, y como no llegaba a mi prelado, no podía tomar, that's I couldn't make decisions about what I should do. So the external prohibition, in this case, it's a counter obligation, it's a non-obligation, and an internal obligation expressed by the verb plus infinitive, the verb hacer. Internal obligation because it's I do, I myself, what I have to do. So the last group of the methodology comes with the passive perspective and the active perspective of the verbal periphrases with participle. The problem here is that the past participle is special due to its nature, so it needs to be in a different group. So I have here some examples too. Otros de ellos estuvieron imaginados para presidir. They had imagined other gods, just to whatever. And Octavianus fue muy amado de todos. He was very loved by everyone. That's a passive voice. That's a pure passive voice. And here, that's one of my favorite ones because that's a parenthetical. That's like to say, como está dicho, means like as above mentioned. So here we can see a kind of a pragmatization. There is not only a passive voice, there is not only a passive perspective or a past participle with a resultative meaning. We are reading a pragmatization. Okay, so regarding the methodology, that's what I'm going to show now are the results over the number of verbal periphrases according to each of the variables that I've already mentioned. Well, you have there the data. I don't want to get you really bored. So as a general overview, I would like to remark that the external natural obligation is one of the most frequent meanings that we can find expressed by the verb haber de, poder, and tener que plus infinitive. Ser and well, the passive voice in Chronicle of the Indies and the permission in letters are the three most frequent values in the corpus. The less frequent is the exemption and the periphrases in the play, empezará and comenzará plus infinitive. That means the beginning of the actions. Well, you have here a general overview, as I have said. That's exactly the same. Well, regarding the time, the variable 1, the verbal periphrase in Spanish Golden Age stay quantitatively steady along the centuries. That's one of my most interesting results, I think. The amount of verbal periphrases as a whole remains the same even till today. And now I'm going to compare my data with the data by Olberts. Olberts works in 20th century, so I think it may be interesting to show you. As you can see at the bottom, I have with a red line tener plus past participle, and in my corpus on the left, tener plus past participle, it's 9.5 against the 0.53. Okay, well, there is a huge difference, and I'm going to let you think why it does that. The second example is, as you will probably see, the line, the red line, empezará 0.82, and we have here in my play 0.4. But comenzará is the other way around. We have 0.4 in the 20th century, and comenzará we have 0.885. Here there has been a change of roles, so to speak. The most frequent comenzará in the Golden Age has been converted in the most frequent today, but the meaning is the same. Both of them are expressing the beginning of the action. And the dejar de, that you can see here in the fourth line, shows 1.25, and in my corpus 1.7. So it's very similar, over 10,000 words. I think the data are very similar, as I have said. Regarding the second variable, the most frequent is always the modality, especially in letters, but it's always in other works that I've already carried out. I don't know why. Well, I have some theories, but always the modality is the most frequent, and the less one is the gradation. The Chronicle of the Indies tend to be more ancient in the sense of more older than other texts, because I suppose, I take for granted that it's because they try to be closer to that language of distance. And well, you have here just to have a look at the graphic if you want to. As I have said, the letters contain the most and the highest number of verbal periphrases, modal verbal periphrases, as I remind you. And finally, the gender. In female texts, the amount of verbal periphrases almost doubles the numbers of verbal periphrases in male texts. But in this case, I assume that's because of the kind, that the meaning, the values of the verbal periphrases that I've chosen for each of the texts. So just to finish, to conclude, verbal periphrases as a whole show up less than 1% over the number of words. Well, in this case, as you have said, over 10,000 words, as in current Spanish. So that means that, as I have said, they stay steadily all along the centuries. There are more verbal periphrases in female texts than in male texts. Modality offers always a far more common meaning than other periphrastic meanings, such as grammatical meaning or aspect, gradation, perfection, inquisitiveness. Differences among these courses may be due to the different writers' intentions, and that's exactly what I'm trying to work on now. For further research, and that makes me aware of my limitations, as I have said, I would like to widen the amount of texts of the corpus, the types and discourses of the corpus, the writer's intentions, because I would like to keep a sociolinguistic approach from a historical point of view, but a sociolinguistic approach to the text. I think it's essential now to understand what is and what isn't important for them, to deepen the role played by gender as a feature, as a specific feature, but not the only one, of course, and to include the continuum in a more specific way, in a more accurate way, language of immediacy, language of distance that I've already just mentioned here, and taken in a very superfluously way. So thanks for your attention, and well, according to my favorite text, I can't be completely sure of everything that can be said. That would be a more or less accurate translation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Patricia. Very impressive and informative. Actually, it is more than 30 minutes, but many questions. Yeah, many questions in our chat room. I will pick one only, Patricia. Maybe for others who gave you question can directly communicate with you via your email shared just now. It is from Professor Edwell, whether you can give the example of VV other than Spanish language. Yes.
If it's a specific of a Spanish language, no.
Other than Spanish language, could you give example of the occurrence of VP other than Spanish? Yeah.
An example of what? Sorry.
Verbal periphrase. The example of verbal periphrase other than Spanish language, maybe from English or French.
Or French. French. Okay. Je vais manger, for instance. It's like I'm going to eat. In Spanish, it's a verbal periphrase because, well, in English perhaps could be also because the verb to be is not, the verb to go is not necessarily a verb with motion meaning. So I'm going to do something means that you are not going to move yourself. You are thinking in the future, in a very, very immediate future. That's a verbal periphrase in Spanish. And, well, must, have to, need, all of them are the modal verbs. So that would be also verbal periphrases in English, in Spanish too, in French, in Italian, in Portuguese. Yeah, that's something that that's something very common in all the Roman languages, because they come from Latin.
Yeah.
So in each language has developed in a different way, but yeah. I don't know if that was your question.
Yeah. That's from Prof. Atwell, but I think it is already answered the question. Miss Patricia, still many questions, but since we still have 3 more speakers, for the attendees who gave question, please you can communicate directly with Miss Patricia if it is possible. Yeah, Miss Patricia, and thank you very much for. Yeah, sorry.
No, I can write on the chat if I may, just to try to answer, because
yeah, still many questions, but time is very limited, Miss Patricia. Okay. Since you share your email address, so maybe the attendees would like to communicate via your email address. Thank you for the very informative, impressive, and interesting presentation, Miss Patricia. Let's give the greatest applause to the presentation of Miss Patricia. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we go on to our 4th speakers. He is Mr. Serkan Karakas from Istanbul Aydın University, Turkey. And Mr. Karakas, he graduated his master degree from Bogaziki and Kili, sorry for mispronunciation, University, and right now he is the lecturer and also a journal editor. And his research interest is syntax, formal semantics, endangered language, morphosyntactic, and linguistic landscape. And this afternoon, Mr. Karakas will talk about some aspects of syntax, clausal complementation in English and Turkish. Okay, please, Mr. Karakas, you have 20 minutes.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this great introduction. Let me share my screen quickly. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Today I'm going to talk about some aspects of syntax, and I'll talk basically about clausal complementation. Our roadmap, so first I'll just talk about generative syntax and complementation if you're not familiar with the framework of generative syntax. Then I'll talk more about broad discussion of finiteness and how different languages encode finiteness. I'll talk about finiteness hierarchy proposed in recently, 2019-2020, by Wonderland, and I'll just talk about how she describes finiteness in different languages. Then I'll talk a little bit about how finiteness is encoded in English and Turkish, then I have my final remarks and conclusion. Yeah. As I said, if you're not familiar with the generative syntactic theory or model, these are the 3 biggest stages of generative syntax, starting with phrase structure grammar. So as you can see, you have here S here, so sentence goes to NP and VP, meaning that NP and VP, S consists of NP and VP. And with influential paper by Chomsky in 1970, we have X-bar theory with the paper and with the name of remarks on normalization. And he introduces basically the X-bar theory here. And then since then, it's still widely used in generative syntax. And since this paper was, first published in 1970, now we are in 2020. So there is also, this is the 15th year of this paper. And now there is, there is a book by Alexiado and Borer called Remarks the Legacy, which was also, parts of the book was also presented in GLOW conference in Berlin. Yeah. And then we have minimalism, which is the latest generative syntactic model. Yeah. If we have a quick look at the complement, specifier, and adjuncts, you have the head of a phrase. As you can see, merges with a complement directly, then it gets X-bar. That was in 1970. And then if you combine it with another element, with X-bar, and it's gonna be, sorry, it's gonna be an adjunct. You have specifiers. Generally, for example, subjects are introduced in the specifier position. Functional categories, C hat. So in this model, we've got lots of functional categories like little VP, C hats, and all that stuff. So TP is a functional hat, and it will be very important for our discussion about finiteness. If you look at here, so this is tense merging with a little VP, and the subject is introduced here, then it moves to the TP position, and this is going to be the hierarchy. And it's just an empty category. No, sometimes it is, especially English, sometimes it is filled, sometimes it is not. If you have a sentence like, I know that John is smart, that here is the C hat, which is filled, or it's not empty. And this on the screen, you can see a complex sentence having a C hat full. So it's not sometimes empty and sometimes not. And yeah, for example, here that he is coming is clear. Again, here, as you can see, we have a complex subject here, which is in the C position, as you can see. Yeah, going back to the main, after this bit of introduction, going back to the main topic, finiteness. What is finiteness anyway? Actually, it's something difficult to describe because some features of it seem to depend on some different properties. Some people try to explain it as a morphological property. Some try to explain it as a syntactic property. Some of the researchers try to explain it as a semantic property. But Rembrandt 2020 basically shows that it is not the case if you want to have a universal hierarchy, universal definition of finiteness. And basically she claimed that finiteness is all of above. It's just a mixture of all. We'll see some morphological elements, syntactic elements, and also the semantic elements as well. So yeah, when we look at some verbs here, so the first, most of the examples are from English since we have this language common. If you have an example with forget, so you have two sentences here. One of them is finite and the other one is non-finite. So the first one is non-finite in a sentence like, I forgot to water the plant. The second sentence, since you have an overt complementizer here and a full CP clause here, this is called finite in English. And I forgot that I watered the plant. If you compare these two sentences, you observe differences in meaning. In the first one, you say, I forgot to water the plant. And the truth condition, semantic truth condition of the sentence is that you actually didn't water the plant. But in the second one, I forgot that I watered the plant. Semantic truth condition is that you actually watered the plant, but you just forgot that instance. So depending on the finiteness, especially in English, meaning seems to change. We'll have more examples with tell, for example. I told John to water the plant. I told John that I watered the plant. In the first one, again, pattern is the same. In the first one, we don't know whether John watered the plant or not. So we don't know about the truth condition of the event predicate or the proposition here. But in the second one, I told John that I watered the plant here again. But now we know that the watering the plant event took place. The same thing goes for C. I saw him water the plant. I see that he watered the plant. So here, if you're familiar with English grammar, in the first one you have, I saw him water the plant. So you see it at the moment. In the second sentence, I see that he watered the plant. But in the second one, you just see later on, you see the plant and you realize that it is watered. But we say he, but we don't really know who that person is. Again, depending on the finiteness, the meaning seems to change. And is this a coincidence that we have a clear change in meaning when the finiteness of the clause changes? And if it is not a coincidence, is the matrix clause responsible for this, or is the subordinate clause that is responsible for this? For example, if you have a sentence like this, this would be, for example, the subordinate clause, and this is going to be the matrix clause. And which one is responsible for the change in the meaning? So that's going to be the second question that emerges based on the differences in meaning that we have been observing so far in English grammar. Yeah. Going back to forget, I forgot to water the plant, so that's non-finite. Forgot that I watered the plant, that's finite. So I forgot that I watered, meaning I watered. I didn't forget that I watered. Again, it goes like I watered again. So the negation here on the matrix clause does not seem to change the meaning at all. But when it comes to negation in the non-finite form, I forgot to water. Basically, I didn't water. I didn't forget to water. It just changes, and it again means I watered. So you see that the difference also happens in negation. Yeah, so again, going back to finite and non-finite distinction, I told him that he won, fine. I told him that he must win, so there must be a typo here. I told him that he must win, that's all of them are finite. I told him to have won. This is again, ungrammatical. Again, we have perfective, infinitive, and again, it seems to be the case that finiteness is sensitive in terms of tense as well. So if you want to try more, we have predicates like claim, be glad, and know. You can try the difference between like I claim that I have won, but is it possible to say I claim to have won, or I claim that I have won? So you can just try by yourselves using more predicates. Yeah. So the recent observation about this tendency is that if a verb has a meaning that alternates, an example of which we have been seeing, depending on the finiteness of the clause, the case of forget, for example, the morphosyntactic coding of the complement clause seems to tend to correspond to different meanings. So Rembrandt basically gives this hierarchy. Non-finite forms are generally implicative, and the factive ones, like I know that I watered, if you have a factive predicate, these are generally tend to be more finite. Basically here we see that the main clause, complement clause is actually the one that is responsible for the difference in meaning in English. Then he gives the example of Serbian, and in Serbian we have got two kind of, if you can see here, two kinds of complementization. But here, as you can see, for example, in the first one, both of them are fine. In the second one, again, both of them are fine. In the third one, you cannot use an overt pronoun. So in this one, you can drop it. But in the third one, you cannot use an overt pronoun. Like name itself, the proper noun or a pronoun, you cannot use it. Again, this piece of data is actually showing that finiteness may also depend on characteristics of the matrix clause, unlike English. That's why she wants to have some kind of universal hierarchy. And Serbian, for example, goes against this claim that actually the complement clause is the one that determines this. Actually, now we have an example of this, showing that matrix clause is also responsible for this. A little bit more introduction about, again, clausal hierarchy. So we have syntactic domain, CEP, so you know Ritzi's cartographic syntax, you have force P, topic P, but all of them are going to be CP domain. The domain that is headed with tense or inflection is going to be called the TP or IP domain. And you have little VP domain that is responsible for the theta position or, theta roles assignment, argument structure more. And Ramchand and Sivinus basically, based on this traditional way of representing clause structure, they give a representation like this. So they say that at C level, we have propositions. So they call C level syntax, EP level syntax, they're called propositions. Then you have TP level syntax, which corresponds to situation in their model. And then we have little VP level domain, then it refers to event structure, the domain of sort E. Again, another study by them, basically, if you combine these two, we have theta domain. This is the little VP in the traditional literature of generative syntax. Then you have TMA tense, modality, and aspect domain, and you have the operator domain where you have propositions, the CP level arrangements. So based on this, so Rembrandt basically combines Ramchand's proposal with the observations that she has been doing for complementation. Then based on the verbs like claim, decide, or manage, she has three different classification of verbs. So she has propositions, situations, and events based on Ramchand hierarchy. And for example, for propositions, she has claim, believe, know, decide, ask, want, manage, try, and begin. So he also talks about why these verbs play an important role in finiteness as well. Basically, propositions are temporally independent. And when it comes to situations, there are time and word parameters because this is under tense. And she gives, and not a little bit about broad classes. So semantic coercion, verbs can shift their meanings. Like if it is used with a feature or if it is used with a progressive, verbs can have shift in their meanings if they are in the second part, because the first part, like propositions, seem to be temporally independent, but since these two are not, so they seem to change meaning. In the case of alternating verbs that we have been observing, they may belong to more than one class actually. And semantics forms basically implication of complementational hierarchy. So based on this, what we have established so far is that complement clauses are built freely, so they're not selected. When the complement clause merges with a matrix clause, the result should be interpretable in LF. And going back to English and Serbian, the relationship between the matrix predicate and complement clause is not unidirectional, but each can affect one another or the other. This results in the partial autonomy of syntax. Yeah. When we look at finiteness in Greek, a little bit introduction. So you have three different verbs here. So the first one is a proposition, the second one is a situation, and the last one is an event. It's like following the hierarchy of Rembrandt. You see that some of the complementizers here, the first one is oti and the second one is na. Oti is problematic with this and na is okay. Oti and na are both okay for the verb like beside. And oti and na, oti is fine for a verb like claim, but na is not okay for a verb like claim. And depends, so again, Greek data also shows that the selection of a complementizer here not only depends on the complement clause itself, but also depends on the main matrix verbs as well. The hierarchy would be like this. So OT basically takes as a sister the TP, creates CP, since this is higher in projection. And for the case of na, in Greek, it merges as T itself. So if you just have a tree down there, then na would be lower in the tree. So basically this hierarchy, implicational hierarchy shows that not all the complementizers merge in the same place in the syntactic derivation. Yeah. When it comes to Turkish cases with verbs like forget, no, Turkish uses the complementizer ki because actually not original Turkish, but borrowed from Persian. So some, especially older speakers do not accept clauses that are headed by complementizer ki, because this is not original Turkish, but borrowed from Persian. And key clause structures are actually follow same clause structure in most European languages, like I know that, ben biliyorum ki, so they follow the same complementizer, same word order, although with the other nominalizers in Turkish, the word order is different due to the fact that Turkish is a different word order. When you have, again, forget the same sentence, çiçeği suladığımı biliyorum. This is non-finite. I know that I watered the plant. Although this is in English, it is finite, but in Turkish you can have the clause which encodes factivity, and then it results in non-finite. And this is the example that follows, as I said, the English pattern. Ben biliyorum ki çiçeği suladım. This is an example that is finite in Turkish, and finite, the translation is finite in English as well. And there are no actual difference in terms of meaning here, on the contrary to the difference that we observe in English. But when it comes to another nominalizer in Turkish, then the difference emerges. In the first one, you have çiçeği suladığımı unuttum. I forgot that I watered the plant. Again, in Turkish, this is non-finite. And çiçeği sulamayı unuttum. I forgot to water the plant. Then the meaning, if you change, both of them are non-finite, but if you change the nominalizer here from dik to ma, then basically you get the difference in meaning. Although in English we have this meaning difference between non-finite and finite, in Turkish it seems to be the case that even we observe differences when the nominalizers change when you have non-finite clauses. Because in the second one, actually, I the event of watering the plant didn't take place, but in the first one, the event of watering the plant took place. Just like following the English example. What is interesting about Turkish is that when you have a finite clause, if you have a finite clause like this, then the meaning is again like activity example. So although English differentiates finite and non-finite in terms of meaning, Turkish has non-finite, even Turkish has a difference in terms of meaning in finite, non-finite complementation. So yeah. So for this hierarchy of Wurmbrand, shows that English follows this hierarchy, Serbian and Greek follows this hierarchy, and today's talk I basically try to show that yes, the hierarchy she proposes also Turkish follows that hierarchy. And Turkish in literature in suffix brings factivity in different contexts, and when used as a complementizer, we see that it yields factivity feature again, which is higher in terms of the hierarchy, so it merges higher compared to the ma suffix, the other suffix, which would merge in the syntactic derivation lower. Yeah. Now, we have dependencies. A dependencies, thematic licensing, case agreement, these are called all A dependencies, and you have cross-clausal dependencies as well. So this is important for the discussion of finiteness. Case and our agreement are determined by or within a different predicate clause than the theta role of the DPs involved. Yeah, for example, here we have raising phenomena in English. Like if you read the sentence, I believe her to have read the paper. Who is the doer of the action of reading the paper? That's her. And the subject is created first here, then it moves in the syntactic derivation to the object position here. And since this cross-clausal dependency says that it is not the case that the matrix clause gives its case, but it's the main matrix clause, not the complementarizer clause, but the main clause itself. So here we see that normally we would expect her to be conjugated in like she, because it's nominative case. You say she has read the paper. But since it's moot, according to cross-clausal dependency, the matrix verb is the one that assigns case to that, which is accusative, not the one not the verb that is in the complementizer, which is again interesting phenomena in English. So again, this also shows that case of the subject embedded in finite clause comes from the matrix predicate. No accusative case in passives. Accusative is possible even when the embedded predicate is passive. And finally, accusative is impossible when the matrix predicate is passive. This hierarchy of her is also present in Turkish. For example, when you have a passive sentence like this, you do not have accusative. Makarna yendi is ungrammatical. You just say makarna yendi. So this here, accusative marking accusative is impossible when you have passives. And again, the other examples also follow her line of thinking. For example, if you look at C, Pelin Timbuktu'ya gitti diye biliniyor. Normally, Pelin is here assigned as nominative case, but here it should be actually the object of the sentence. Then Pelin should have already been assigned with an accusative case. But according to the hierarchy that she claims, not the complementarizer clause gives its case, but the main clause gives its case. Therefore, we have no marking here, or we have nominative case marking because it functions as a subject here. Yeah. To shortly conclude, there's actually no clear-cut definition of finiteness because it includes morphological or semantic and as well as syntactic elements. Both the embedded clause and matrix clause play a role in determining the finiteness. So if you look at English only, you will say that embedded clause is the one that determines. But if you look at different varieties of languages like Greek, Serbian, and Turkish, you will see that both embedded clause and matrix clause actually are responsible for determining the finiteness. And finiteness can be as high as the CP level that we see for the case oti in Greek, or it can be lower for the case of na, that is the sister of t in Greek. Case assignment in ECM, exceptional case marking, CP basically blocks A dependencies as they are thought to be a bar domain. So these are basically my references. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Caracas. Very informative. You inform us how English and Turkish are different in terms of clausal complementation. And the question from Mr. IND. Mr. IND would like to know about the rising and control predicate. Rising and control predicate, Mr. Caracas. For example, John tries to fix the computer, and John seems to fix the computer. Okay.
In Turkish, we don't have subject-to-subject raising. In English, we have subject-to-subject raising and subject-to-object raising. So subject-object raising would be the example of I believe her to win the game, something like this. Because here we have the subject she that is generated in the subject position of a clause, the complement clause. Then it moves to the object position of the matrix clause. And then the matrix clause verb assigns the accusative case. That's why she turns into her in the example like this. For SSR raising, for subject raising, things are more different. Because in an example like a sim predicate, like John seems to be handsome. If you have a sentence like this, John seems to be handsome. So be handsome has the subject John, which is again created or generated in the subject position of the complement clause. And it moves to the subject position, this time not object position that we have in believe, but this time it moves to the subject position of the main clause. It is assigned with a nominative case because this time we have John merged in the finally merged in the subject position of the predicate seem, like in the case of John seems to be tall. And control predicates is again following the same pattern, but this time the difference between raising and control is that control is we have pro here that controls it, but if you have raising, basically there is an instance of movement. So both cases I talked about, like the cases in seem predicate and cases in believe predicate, in both of them we have movement. Subjects generated in the complement clause, then it moves either the object position in the case of believe or to the subject position in the case of theme. When we have control constructions, this is not so there is no movement, but there is the control mechanism. That's why they're called control. And I guess there is so intensive literature on that, but I guess due to the time restrictions, I believe I had better not talk about more.
Yeah. Thank you. You know that you have only 30 minutes, Mr. Caracas, but I'm sure that many participants still want to know more about English and Turkish clausal complementation, the differences between these two languages. And it is very nice and impressive talk, very informative. Thank you very much, Mr. Caracas, and let's give a great applause to Mr. Caracas. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for reminding me. I'm really happy to be here. Very glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually, we still have two more speakers, but unfortunately, Mr. Muhammad cannot join our symposium today because he just sent us information that his son got accident and he has to go to the hospital. So perhaps tomorrow, we hope that Mr. Muhammad can join our symposium, and so Dr. Shoki will be the last speaker for our symposium today. And Dr. Shoki is from Shakra University, Saudi Arabia. And his qualification is he got PhD from Menufia University, Egypt. And right now, Mr. Shoki is the assistant professor, and his research interest is about cognitive linguistics, sociolinguistics, and translation. If we previously talked about VP, verbal periphrase and syntax. And now we go to we go to conceptual metaphor. So Mr. Shoki Khalifa will talk about conceptual metaphor this afternoon. Okay, you have 20 minutes, Mr. Shoki, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thank you for giving me the chance to participate in your online symposium. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Can I share my presentation?
Yes.
Okay,
Please.
thank you, Doctor. I'd like at the beginning of my presentation, I'd like to thank you and the University of Andalas for giving me the chance to be with you on this insightful online symposium. I'm so happy to be with you today. So as you see, the title of my presentation, it's about conceptual theory. And I'm going to take an example about applying this wonderful approach to linguistic analysis about women in the Egyptian proverbs. So I have selected some rural Egyptian proverbs about women, and I'm going, according to the conceptual theory, to analyze how the Egyptian collective mind think of women, especially as this approach, the conceptual metaphor theory, see how the language is taken to be a window into how people think. So I'm going to start with, excuse me, I'm going to start with the first definition. Definition, to go backward to the definition of metaphor. That's right. As I see, there are two broad approaches to defining a metaphor. The general classical traditional definition that is given prior to the rise of the modern schools of linguistics. And also we have a second modern definition of metaphor. It's that one provided by cognitive linguists and the linguists in general, those people specialized in the fields of linguistic and stylistic analyses. So as you see here, we are going to take, that's to say, we're going to, the traditional definitions of metaphor all the time focus on showing how metaphor reflects a linguistic phenomenon, which uses a word instead of another on the basis of some kind of similarity that can relate the two language units as used mainly by rhetoricians and manipulators. So this is the classical or the traditional definition of metaphor. It looks at metaphor as being a kind of linguistic phenomenon that in which we use a word instead of another because of a similarity-based relationship. So I go back to my background as being an Arab. So I checked the Arabic rhetoric and I found the same classical traditional definition of a metaphor. In Arabic rhetoric, metaphor is rhetorically defined as the use of a word in place of another because of a similarity-based relationship. And there, in the metaphor, we find that Al-Jurjani, one of the famous Arab rhetoricians, and Ibn Jinni also refer to metaphor as we should have three things or three components. So there should be a lexical clue as in our use of the word the rose instead of the word the girl in the following example. So if you look at a beautiful girl and I'm going to say the rose smiled, the rose smiled. So here, this is a metaphor. That's right. This is a metaphor, even Arabic or in English. So the rose smile here, according to the traditional definition, Here in the metaphoric expression, there should be three components so as to define this sentence or this expression as being metaphoric. We have the tenor, the poet to, the girl, which is deleted but understood from the context. And we have the vehicle or the poet from, the rose stated here. And also we have a lexical clue, which is used in a semantic field, which is different completely from its non-allegorical or intrinsic one. And it implies the similar features between the tenor and the vehicle. So the word smile here is used out of its intrinsic usage because the rose cannot smile. So here, this word is used metaphorically. This word is used metaphorically. So here also in the Western rhetoric, when I reviewed the Western rhetoric, the word metaphor stems from the Greek word metaphorein, where the morpheme meta means over, and the second morpheme phorein means to carry. And the whole word refers to a linguistic process through which features of one entity are carried over or transferred to another entity, so that the second entity is talked about as if it were the first one. This is a definition, or the classical definition, given by Hawke. That's right, given by Hawkes in 1972. So here, from the traditional viewpoint, whether in Arabic or in the Western tradition, we see that all figures of speech or tropes were traditionally thought of as deviations from literal meanings towards figurative meanings. And the metaphor in particular was considered as the basic pattern of linguistic deviation. So here, so whether the classical or the traditional viewpoint, whether in the Arab society or in the Arab culture or the Western tradition, they looked at a metaphor as being some kind of linguistic deviation from the literal meaning. Here comes a our new approach, that's right, the cognitive view of metaphor, and I'm going to focus especially on the conceptual metaphor, because there are some other different cognitive view of metaphor. So metaphor in this view is not considered as a linguistic phenomenon. This is the only difference here. But on the contrary, metaphor in this approach is something connected with concepts and with thoughts. And it's not something also restricted to the usage of literary writing, something used only by men of letters or by rhetoricians. But it is found, according to Lakoff, that metaphor is pervasive in everyday life, not just in language, but in thought and actions, everything. And a metaphor is a widely distributed phenomenon that involves all the material, cultural reality, as well as the physical events. So here, I think that metaphor is so widespread, something not restricted to language, but it's something more, it's wider than this. So here, in this approach and this view, it is cognitively defined metaphor as understanding and experiencing one kind of thing in terms of another. This is the definition, or the cognitive definition, or the definition given by cognitive linguists, especially by Lakoff and Johnson in their seminal book in 1980. And this is, it's edited, new version 2003. It's a kind of understanding and experiencing one kind of thing in terms of another. So from this definition, we see a complete shift of the definition of looking at metaphor. As such, metaphor is more reviewed as a rhetorical device for mere language ornament. It's no more a kind of embellishment or mere language ornament, something decorative, for example, but metaphor is conceived of as a characteristic of concepts and not of words. So this is what's more important here. You see from also the definition given that the primary function of metaphor is to help better understand abstract concepts and ideas. And this is the second participation of this school or this approach. So here, once again, metaphor refers to understanding one conceptual domain. So here, one conceptual domain in view of another conceptual domain. So, and therefore, the primary function of metaphor is to help understand, especially and particularly, abstract concepts and ideas, such as life and arguments, in terms of other tangible, concrete concepts, such as, for example, journeys and wars, respectively. If I want to understand, for example, what do we mean by life, because life is something abstract and it needs some illustration or arguments. What's argument? So the human mind works metaphorically so as to materialize these abstract concepts. So here, these are some examples, for example, taken from Lakoff and Johnson. So arguments are wars. So sometimes when we are going to understand what's an argument, so we go to the semantic field of wars and we take these concepts so as to clarify and materialize what do we mean by arguments. So here we are going to see that your claims are indefensible. So the italicized words here are all semantic lexemes or items which are taken from the field of wars. And we use them so as to facilitate or to highlight some aspects in the field or in the domain of arguments. So your claims are indefensible, and he attacked every weak point in my argument. He shot down all my arguments, and his criticisms were right on target. So you feel that whenever a Western speaker wants to speak about arguments, so he resorts to the physical domain of wars. This is the case, or this is the definition of the conceptual metaphor here. So here, I'm going to shed light on what do we mean by domains. So we have here two different domains. The source domain, as you see, the field of experience, from which we draw metaphorical expressions to comprehend another abstract, intangible conceptual domain, and the target domain from which we are going to take some aspects so as to understand or to describe the first source domain, the second domain. Also, the conceptual domain which we try to understand, the target domain is the conceptual domain which we try to understand or even to describe in terms of the source domain. And according to Covaces, what do we mean by a conceptual domain? So it's whether a source or a target is any coherent organization of experience. And this is something very important here, that he says experience. So this school or this approach, I mean, the conceptual metaphor, it depends on experiential motivation of the language. So here, any coherent organization of experience. So let's go, and these domains, whether the source or the target, are natural. And this means they are a product of one's perceptual sensory motor apparatus and mental faculties and emotional makeup. So they are something that's connected with our physical life. And they thus are described to be a product of human nature that shares some universal features and also some culture-specific elements. So here he gives us the chance, or this definition gives us the chance to say that why we are somehow different in understanding just one concept or a similar concept. So I think that the Indonesian, for example, and the Egyptian, for example, sometimes have the same, if we want to speak about the same concept of life or the concept of love, sometimes we are going to be different in materializing and understanding the concept of love or the concept of life. It depends upon the physical environment and some other things which we depend on understanding. So here, as you see, we get what is meaning according to the conceptual metaphor theory. So meaning is an experiential construct. This is something, as you see, very important. So speakers who live in a certain community and share similar experiences would acquire similar meanings of the objects existing in the environment around them. So here appears the culture-specific metaphors, which leads to differences between societies and culture. So once again, we are going to see what are the main tenets of the conceptual metaphor. The experiential number one, this theory have some basics. The first one, which is the experiential motivation of a conceptual metaphor. Here, the founders of this approach believe in that is to say, the motivation or the motivated embodiment of language. It's that's right, contrary, opposite to the classical and traditional school, which says that language in all cases is something arbitrary. So there is a strong, according to them, there is a strong relationship between our mental concepts and way of thinking and the daily experience. So here, this relationship leads us to say that the relationship between language and the thinking is highly motivated and not arbitrary as believed by the traditionalists. Also, they believe in the perceptual motivation. Some conceptual metaphors are motivated by human sensory perception. So in sense, how a person's sensory motor apparatus perceives the physical world around them. And this kind of perceptual motivation is subdivided into experiential co-occurrence, which is sometimes when we are going to look around us and see when we are going to put more liquid in a bottle, and this liquid increases vertically, so we are going to have the experiential co-occurrence that everything is more, or to give the metaphor, more is up. When we are going to increase the liquid in a bottle or in a container, so it's getting higher, and that's why, according to this perceptual this physical experience, we have the metaphor more is up. And also the second type of this perceptual motivation is an experiential similarity, which is apparent when we are going to find the relationship between the source domain and the target domain in some aspects and not all aspects. For example, when we see life is a kind of journey that has a beginning and that has an end and has some ups and downs like a journey. So we speak of life as a kind of journey. This depends on an experiential similarity. So here, this is the second tenet of this school. We move to the third. Here we have something also which was called the image schema motivation. So according to some of our mental concepts are grounded in these image schema derived from our earliest perceptions of ourselves as embodied creatures that having an inside and outside. We feel that we are, that's right, have an image schema of ourselves as a container. We have an inside and outside, we have peripheries, and we have up and down. According to this, our human mind tries to use or to utilize this image schema in materializing some of our abstract concepts. For example, we're going to say states are locations in language. This metaphor is derived from, that's to say, the image schema which our human mind obtains. So states are locations. He spent all his life in misery. So here, the state of being miserable so is thought of by the human mind as being as a container here, state being in such a state of misery. That's right. So it's likened to be in a container. So, or in a location, I'm sorry, in a location. So here they lived in happiness. So happiness here is looked or is thought of as a place or as a location. So here, this concept or this metaphor helps us in understanding any emotion concepts, and also analyzing the states or the case of states, activities, and events. And then finally, one of the basic tenets of this theory is the bodily motivation. It depends on about the physiology and the case of our human body. Some metaphors or some conceptual metaphor have their experiential groundedness in the functioning of the human body. For example, when we look at anger as being heat, anger is heat. So this is a result or a normal consequence of feeling your body heating or getting warm when you get angry, for example. And that's why we find in the Western or the English language, Western culture, a lot of expressions, and even in Arabic, I have collected some expression which, that is to say, this metaphor is correct. That is to say that we speak about anger as being some kind of heat, being hot. So here, this is an example. He's letting off some steam. He's letting off some steam. So this means he's angry, and that's why this anger here is looked at as being heat or something hot, or a liquid, a hot liquid. So here, it depends about the physiology or the bodily motivation of getting such a metaphor. Culture, also something very important in the case of understanding or conceptualizing our abstract ideas and thoughts. So the concept culture here is usually used to refer to a system of collective beliefs and worldviews, customs, traditions, values, norms, and even the physical environment around us. So these are all be utilized by the speaker to conceptualize or to materialize his thoughts. So any metaphorical analysis, that's why any metaphorical analysis should involve cultural elements in order to properly interpret the conceptualization underlying metaphorical mapping. So we should take into consideration or take into account the cultural elements and the physical environment while analyzing any linguistic items or any metaphoric expressions. Consequently, here we find the culture-specific metaphors emerge. And here comes, I'm going to, in my analysis here, all of our experience is in essence cultural and even bodily and perceptual experiences, because they occur within a framework of cultural assumptions, values, and attitudes. And these, of course, assumptions, values, and attitudes, and your cultural background affect your selection or your choice of words so as to express, and this also be reflected on language. Here, when I follow or select to how the woman in the Egyptian proverbs are reflected, so I'm going to look at language as a window into how people thought or how the human mind works, and especially in this aspect, especially how we look or how people think of women. So the first thing that I found from the corpus of Egyptian proverbs, rural proverbs, that I found that when people sometimes speak about a woman, they speak about her in terms of a land. And I think if we are going to speak together as being Muslim, I find that in the Holy Quran, we find that this is something is referred to by Allah, especially Nisa'ukum harthun lakum. So here, the word harth, it's a tilth, it's a land. But here I find that the land source domain which is utilized or is used by the Egyptians so as to understand the specific features in the woman's character or the woman's psyche or the woman's makeup, they are used it whenever they speak especially about the woman's infertility or fertility and spinsterhood. So whenever they are going to refer to a woman as being responsible about getting the children or not, so you speak about her in terms of land. And that's why this is an Egyptian proverb here. A straying woman should be sent back to her father's home. This is one of the Egyptian proverbs. A straying woman, this means a barren woman should be sent back to her father's home. So here, if a woman is not able to get children, she's sterile. So to speak her, she's the only one that is responsible about this. So she should be sent back to her father. That's right, father's home. So here also, the husband here is referred to he, but I would like to give the Egyptian proverbs because they have some kind of harmony, some kind of rhythm, but I found that it would be difficult for you to follow the Arabic, but I translated it into English here to facilitate the matter. He cultivated, this is another, for example, another proverb, Egyptian proverb. He cultivated a seed in a barren land. So this proverb is a sentential metaphor here. The whole sentence is a metaphor because here he uses the pronoun he, that's right, the generic pronoun here, he, to refer to the husband. And the land or the barren land here is used in, that's right, instead of the wife or the lady. So, and he speaks about the wife here, or people speak about the wife here in terms of a barren land. That's right. So also here, this barren land is repeated, the barren land is repeated a lot of time in the Egyptian proverbs. Even if you are going to look at the third proverb here, also, but I think that this proverb is uttered by a woman because she says OC as if she is addressing her husband or her lover. That's right, whatever she is addressing a male addressee. OC, I only come as a visitor as I'm so arid. I think this proverb, she says, she addressing the male addressee, OC, she speaks of about the male addressee as being a sea. And why she comes to visit the sea? Because she's so arid. And I think that arid here is used from the semantic field of land, that's right, to express that she needs water. And here, that's right, you see that speaking about woman is used, that's right, speaking about woman is conceived of as being land. And what's more important is that this land is responsible for, and here, yeah, I'm going to give you the components of the barren land here. So the barren land here is responsible for the bad quality, whether of children, because of the land is poor. So I think that, if she, in case, if she getting children and they are going to be unhealthy, for example, so who's responsible for this? It's not the wife, it's not the husband, but she's the wife. That's right, because she's the land, and the land is responsible for the quality of the crops or the product. So here, the barren land is responsible for the bad quality. Also, the invalidity of the product, she is also responsible for this. And the barren land, of course, needs reclamation. And that's why, so I see that here from this linguistic analysis, that the lady or the wife is totally responsible for everything in the Egyptian collective mind. So here also the land or the barren land is something common, is something widespread. You can find it everywhere. So here you find that it's also, it means that the commonality of the product, the commonality of the ladies. So, and that's why we find an Egyptian proverb which it says that a man should sit in a dive-in and select, that's right, whoever a lady he wants. So in this proverb, or Egyptian proverb, gives a chance for the men to select from, that's right, a variety of ladies. And if the ladies are so common, and that's why, but on the opposite, the gentleman is rare, that's right. And also there is an Egyptian proverb which is say, the only defect of a man is the rarity of men. And so men are rare, but ladies and women are so common and so widespread, so you can choose whatever you want. Here also from the linguistic analysis of the barren land, we find that a lady is responsible about the impotency and the infertility. And that's why if that's to say a family is not going to get a children, so the only thing that he's going to think of is to marry another wife or a co-wife. In this case, we find that the proverbs prejudice the ladies here in the Egyptian culture. So something more important, another concept about ladies in the Egyptian proverbs is a woman is an animal. Whenever we are going to look at the great chain of being designed by George Locke and Johnson, we find that whenever we are going to speak about a human in terms of an animal, so we are going to shed light about an essential property in which the animal, that's right, is characterized with. So when we speak about a woman in terms of an animal, so I think that we need to understand a specific character trait in the, that's right, of a woman. And that's why we are going to materialize this in speaking or to resort to the source domain of animals. For example, here, this is an Egyptian rural proverb here. A man is tied by his tongue, a woman by her rein. And I can utter the proverb in Egyptian dialect or the Arabic language if you wish, because it's rhythmic more than English. So الراجل بيتربط من لسانه والمرأة بتتربط من لجامها. A man is tied by his tongue, a woman by her rein. So you feel here that a man is tied by his tongue. So this is refers to that a man doesn't blabber a lot, and he doesn't break his promises. But unfortunately, the proverb represents the woman here as being tied by her rein. And the word rein in Arabic language is something that is related only to a donkey, a horse, or whatever, an animal, and it's used to control the animal, because you know that the animal, something or an essential property, an animal, that's right, is behaving or behaves instinctively. And whenever you want to control an animal, here you are going, it's better for a person to be on top of the animal. And this is the mental image that I can, or everyone can get it by reading this proverb. And here we get another orientational conceptual metaphor about a lady here through the analysis of this proverb, that a man is up and a woman is down. Whenever you want to control a lady by a rein, so you should be on top of her. So try to look at the source domain of animals being reined, being controlled by a rein. So here we are going to say that here also this proverb, we can infer that this leads to the inferiority and this submission of a lady in the Egyptian culture, or how it is represented by the proverb. But I say this is a proverb, but it's not something widespread in the Egyptian society, but sometimes we say that this is something negative and we need to get rid of these proverbs. Another proverb to refer to how people think, how the Egyptian collective mind think of a lady when they think or resort to also the source domain of animals. Shackle her, this means a girl, shackle her with steel fetters and get her married to a rich man. Shackle her with steel fetters and get her married to a rich man. So here, if you are going to find the word shackle and steel fetters, these are just the words or lexical items which are derived from the animal domain, because the only, that's right, the only being or the only entity that is being shackled or to be tied with feathers is what would say a she-buffalo or a cow or whatever, a dog. So here, and they try to get her married to a rich man. I think that this proverb referred to that a lady or a woman doesn't have the chance even to choose her future husband, because she is obliged to do what the male superior or her male guardian wants her to do. And the word here, the repetition, even the repetition of the word the shackle and the steel fetters refers to how that's to say they think of a woman that she's not able to decide for herself, because she is thought of as being an animal, and an animal is not able to rationalize. An animal is irrational, is not able to think quite rationally. And that's why there should be another human to decide for her. So here you see that the third proverb here, as you see, whoever lets, and that's why being irrational and being unable to take decision for herself, being moved by her instincts. So I think that male people should take care of the woman's or of the lady's character and should put her under observation wherever she goes. She should be restricted and confined to specific places and not to given the freedom to think. And this is what is included by the third proverb here. Whoever lets his she-goat or nanny loose, she will bring him a billy goat. I think that this proverb also is totally a sentential metaphor in which we use the animal world to speak about humans, or we are going to use the source domain of animals to speak about, that's right, humans here. So whoever lets his she-goat, a she-goat here represents, or that is to say, a lady or a girl. So here, if you are going to give her the freedom, that's right, she will bring him back. So the specific level schema of the proverb here, that there is a male agent who is giving, that is to say, the female her freedom to go wherever she wants. What is the result due to this? That's right, she returns back with a billy goat. This means she returns back with a strange or a foreigner gentleman with her. So, if we are going to think why this, I think because she's irrational, she's over-sexual. So some of the characteristics which we can, as humans, think of according to this animal source domain. If you are going to say, why an animal go back with a billy goat, why she does this, So try to look at the nanny or the she-goat, and according to her instincts, she is going to behave. And that's why this idea is once again repeated in the fourth proverb: when men are away, ladies go astray. When men are away, ladies go astray. So once again, it's repeated that when, as you see, when women are given the freedom, they are rational, irrational, and they are over-sexual. So that's why pay attention to keep them and to confine them, because they are animals, I'm sorry to say, according to the proverb. And that's why here, when our men are away, ladies go astray. So the word astray in Arabic, the word astray in Arabic, something we call it saba. Saba in the Arabic language, it's something confined, restricted to the animals who are going to set free in the field. And here, if you are going to look at these two concepts in the Egyptian proverb, you will find that the conceptual metaphor theory applied to see how people or the Egyptian collective mind think of women according to the analysis or the linguistic analysis of these proverbs. I think it's a helpful, insightful tool, the conceptual metaphor theory, to think or to see how people use metaphors, or to speak metaphorically about abstract concepts or abstract ideas. I think I'd like to end my presentation with thanking you for your time and for listening to me. Dr. Ika, thank you very much for giving me the chance to participate in your online symposium, and my regards to all the Indonesian people.
Thank you, Mr. Shoki. It is very informative. It is very nice talk, because from the chat room, I saw many various interpretation from the attendees, because you are mostly talking about how women is put metaphorically. Yeah. And we let you exceed the time because you are the last speakers, Mr. Dr. Shoki. And I will read I will choose one question from many questions come up in chat room. It is from Mr. Jupri Zulprianto, and he is going to be tomorrow moderator. Mr. Jupri stated that he wondered whether you happen to find your data, the conceptual metaphor for infertile men, not women, but men.
Yeah, the corpus. Yeah. I'm sorry for interruption. Go.
Okay. Yeah, please, Dr. Shoki.
Yeah, the corpus itself, I've collected a lot of, that's right, I've collected a lot of data about gender, both male and female. And that's right, the analysis found that the proverbs focus more, 81% on women, and the rest of the 100% is in men. As if the life or the journey of the lady in the Egyptian life has been put under meticulous observation by the proverbs, as if it is a strange creature. But men, most of the proverbs told about men, they are positive in its connotation. And that's why I focused on the analysis of metaphors related to women.
Okay, Mr. Shoki, very interesting. Because the time is restricted, so from your presentation, I can conclude that that metaphor is really the collection of mind. It is very ethnocentrical, it is very local, and it is not universal, and very, very contextual. And thank you very much.
Not totally universal, not totally cultural specific, but it is there are some universal metaphors according to the common human physiology and biology. We are similar to each other as a human. That's why we have something in common, and we have something different because of our different cultures and physical environment.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shoki. And yeah. And thank you very much, Dr. Shoki. And please give very warm applause to Dr. Shoki. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to all great presenters from 2 o'clock till 5. And from this presentation, we can know that talking about language is very wonderful. Many things around us can be the inspiration to be the topic, not only related to macro, but also micro linguistics. We can conduct research related to internal aspect of language as well as the external ones. Language around public area in linguistic landscape, the use of metaphor, periphrase, that all can be viewed from syntactical point of view and can be tempered by the use of technology as the artificial language. Will we still complain, no idea to our research, or do not know what to do related to linguistic research? Ladies and gentlemen, I think our keynote speakers have already inspired us and given us very brilliant ideas, very brilliant information, insightful related to linguistics. So let's now start preparing and designing for research, because our environment is the labor of linguistics. We must be proud of being part of those who have great interest toward linguistics and be among wonderful linguists this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the agendas we have today. Let's give once more the very warm applause to our outstanding keynote speakers for the informative, insightful, awesome presentation, and also the greatest applause to all of us here. Thank you very much, Prof. Octavianus, Prof. Atwell, Dr. Patricia.
Thank you very much.
Tarkan Karakas and Dr. Shoki, thank you very much. And to all the attendees, I thank you very much for your active participation, your enthusiasm, and your seriousness. We do hope that you enjoy today's program. And please be noted that tomorrow is the second day of our symposium. Please join us again around 8 a.m. Indonesian time. Thank you very much. Keep staying healthy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you all.
Back to Pak Handoko.
Okay. Thank you. Nice talks today. It's very insightful.
Speakers, Bapak Kristana. Terima kasih, Pak.
Can we have photo session?
Terima kasih, Bapak.
Thank you, Prof. Atwell.
Do we have photo session, Pak Handoko?
Yeah, of course, we can take a pictures.
Yes.
Please turn on your camera and we can have a photo session. So hopefully I can post it to Facebook and mention some friends so they can join us tomorrow. Okay.
The topics are all interesting and very insightful.
Okay, yeah. So as Bu Rina mentioned in the chat that I think we need more time to discuss about many issues in linguistics, and maybe later on we can, we can create a forum and discuss about it. Santai, Bu. Tuh, Bu.
Mana kameranya, Pak?
Nah, Bu Vera yang merekam, Bu, capture, Bu.
Thank you, Dr. Hanadoka, for your, that's right, for your work. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I will get in touch on you, and maybe we can have another talks. Yeah, maybe we can invite you to our other conference. Hopefully for all of you.
Have you taken the photo already?
Bu Vera.
Bu Vera.
Ya,
Ready?
Lagi ngambil foto. Ya, oke.
Okay. Yeah.
Siap, Bapak Ibu, siap.
1, 2, 3.
Ya. 1, 2, 3.
Smile.
Okay, smile. Okay.
Purina can give one positive metaphor about women.
Yes, Dr. Octavianus. I'd like to say something very important. I've collected a lot of positive proverbs about women in the Egyptian culture, and one of them is said, that is to say, اللي يسعدها زمانها تجيب بناتها قبل صبيانها. In English, it is translated, whoever is blessed by God to get her girls before her sons. But that's right, her daughters before her sons. So if she gets a daughter first, that's right, is better than getting a son.
Mr. Soke, I wrote metaphor for my dissertation. Minangkabau metaphor.
Yeah.
So perhaps later we invite Dr. Shoki to talk about positive metaphor about women.
It's
So
a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
will feel that it is humiliated.
Yes.
Dr. Shoki, I want to ask you one question, really. As you said, the rose smiled.
Yeah, the rose smiled.
The rose smiled, metaphorically personificated or metaphor only?
No, this is a metaphorical expression according to the classical traditional school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the smile, if you look at the girl and say the rose smiled, so you refer here to the girl. Yeah. But I promise you to present something about the positive aspects in the Egyptian proverbs, because this is wonderful also to shed light on both positive and negative.
Okay.
Right.
So as to change the mental image that you
forward
have got.
to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you.
We are looking forward to hearing that.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Atwell. Professor Atwell, thank you for sharing the links. Yes, thank you for sharing the links.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a nice kitchen.
English is not prestigious in UK, but in Indonesia, yes.
Yeah.
It's pink.
Wow.
Pink. And colorful.
Colorful room.
So this is the advantages of COVID-19. We can see room of Professor Atwell from Padang.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we go to UK, then we need time and money, right, to see Professor Atwell's room.
Okay.
But if we invite Professor Atwell to Padang, we can eat nasi Padang, you know.
But there is no nasi Padang in Padang, Prof. Octavianus.
Yes, we can in Padang Baru. Yes.
Padang food.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Octavianus.
Thank you.
Bye. See you tomorrow. Thank you.
See you, Prof.
See you.
Pak Gusdi Sastra, thank you so much, Pak. Terima kasih, Pak Gusdi.
Oh ya.
Welcome, Rika.
Iya, Pak. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu, kawan-kawan semua, senior.
Sama.
Selamat panitia. Makasih Bu Ike, moderator.
Sama-sama Bu Rina. Sampai ketemu besok.
You did great.
Yes, Bu Rina. I agree with you.
Tahu nggak Bu Rina? Nggak tahu kan? Tadi agak ngantuk. Dan ini sebelah kanan Pak Rektor masih ngomong-ngomong.
Multi talented person, multitasking.
Iya. Oke.
Can we end the meeting?
Jalan pulang ya. Oke, hati-hati. Salam yang nyetir ya.
Ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Terima kasih semua panitia. Apa tuh? Oh, masih itu nih. Masih itu. Biasalah. Ya. Besok dulu. Kok ada ngisi?
Enggak tarik apa tuh.
Lift lah.
Makan gitu. Makan punya Mumut. Gimana, Nak? Ini on the way to Padang. Kan panitia lagi tinggal.
Masih 36, Bu.
Istirahat Koko.
Ya.
Link dari Profesor Atwell tadi itu banyak itu sangat bagus, sangat bagus tadi ini.
Gimana nyebukanya nanti itu apa Doko?
Iya, bisa kan nanti.
Nanti direkap aja, Bu.
Iya. Itu keren-keren sekali tadi.
Nanti kalau kurang-kurang kan kita tinggal buat acara lagi, gampang aja sih, Bu.
Oh iya. Ada pertanyaan beliau kasih apa kan? Kasih link. Nah, ini referensinya itu kan sourcesnya bagus sekali.
Ya, dia memang beliau orangnya gitu. Dia aktif dibandingkan
Ya, langsung berbagi informasi, langsung ini cari ya. Kalau ini dibaca gitu, langsung dikasih link.
Oke, alhamdulillah acara kita hari pertama lancar, ya tidak ada yang tidak ada sedikit lah, alhamdulillah.
Ya, alhamdulillah. Ya.
Sukses.
Oke.
Oke, selamat istirahat. Kasihan tuh yang di kampus belum pulang.
Nah, siap-siap besok Bu Rina.
Besok yang kita buat itu lagi Bu. Ini kan kita udah kelihatan, ini besok kita ambil yang kuliah pakar aja lagi. Jadi bisa 1 jam atau 1,5 jam gitu kan.
Itu kan semacam kuliah umum kan sekarang kan brainstorming lah.
Sebenarnya memang kan ini tujuannya kenapa kau milihnya simposium, karena itu Bu, artinya lebih blending kita daripada harus conference yang formal gitu.
Iya.
Kadang kan kita enaknya kalau simposium itu agak beda nuansanya.
Wah, keren lah Pak Handoko. Ini sudah bisa bawa mengajak narasumber-narasumber hebat ini.
Pak Sauki tadi bagus penjelasannya. Keren. Nanti
selamat untuk jurusan, untuk panitia, untuk Handoko, untuk Pak Yendi, Pak Rina, untuk moderator, untuk pembicara Pak Octavianus.
Nampaknya Pak Soerman dulu makan nih, suaranya agak ya.
Iya, lagi flu katanya. Tapi bukan flu apa namanya? Flu burung. Bagus caranya kok.
Ya, siap, alhamdulillah Pak.
Izin pamit ya.